Welcome back to the podcast, folks. Today we're diving into that Astralis versus Natus Vincere clash at IEM Chengdu 2025, a real roller coaster of map picks and in-game drama.
Oh, absolutely. The excitement was off the charts. What stood out to you first in this matchup?
Well, first off, the map vetoes were kinda wild. Astralis removed Dust 2 and Train, while Navy countered by removing Overpass and Ancient, leaving us with Nuke, Mirage, and Inferno. And that leftover map dynamic really set the stage.
Right, and if you think about it, it's like setting up a chessboard with only a few specific pieces in play. So, how did the maps themselves go?
On Nuke, it was a tight affair. Astralis narrowly won with a 16-13 stat in rounds, while on Inferno, they managed a 16-13 finish too. But Navi pulled off a comeback on Mirage, thanks in part to some insane clutch plays.
Incredible. And I remember all those clutch plays 1 versus 2, and even a few 1 versus 3 situations, right?
Exactly, there were multiple clutches. For instance, Magisk and Device had standout performances. Magisk's clutch moments, especially that 1 versus 3 play, absolutely turned the tide for Astralis on Nuke. And Device also stepped up
Yeah.
remarkably despite some mixed stats.
Speaking of stats, the numbers were really telling. Astralis had players like Jabi and Husi putting up solid numbers, but there were also some glaring issues with consistency. What do you think caused that?
Well, it seemed like Astralis was struggling a bit with their T side, particularly noted in several community comments. There were opinions floating around claiming they overcompensated on defense. It's like they were playing a completely different game on one side. That inconsistency might have cost them crucial rounds.
I've seen fans calling Astralis' current performance struggling compared to their old form, especially when pitted against Navi's aggressive playstyle. That contrast is really interesting.
Absolutely. And on the flip side, NAVI, despite being the underdogs at times, managed to leverage their map strengths, particularly on Mirage and Inferno. Their strategic picks, combined with clutches from players like Alexib and Makazi, pushed the match into those intense overtime rounds.
Right, and those overtime rounds were something else. There was that moment when Makasi's performance on the yard defense was highlighted 4 AWP kills. That's not something you see every day.
Totally. And it really showed that even when the team's overall strategy was challenged, individual brilliance could steal the spotlight. But, there's a bit of controversy too. Some fans were pretty critical of certain decisions, especially when Astralis lost rounds that looked winnable. There was this sentiment that some calls were off, like when Device was in a momentarily weaker position.
Yeah, I recall several HLTV comments ridiculing certain in game decisions. Some even labeled it as trash versus garbage. There's a bit of a debate on whether these decisions reflect a broader team strategy issue or just isolated moments of miscommunication.
Exactly. And the community wasn't shy about airing their opinions. Some were calling for Astralis to disband after a string of poor moves, while others were more forgiving, citing occasional flashes of their old genius. It's like a tug of war between nostalgia and current performance.
That's a fair point. And what about the lineup changes? I noticed that Astralis' world rank was hovering around number 13 compared to Navi's number 7, but with a twist in the points changes post match. How did that affect the overall narrative?
Oh yes, that was a major talking point. Astralis went from 1,611 points at number 14 to 1,827 points at number 7 after the match, yet some of the fans weren't convinced by the points boost due to the match's gritty nature. It raises the question, does a points climb really reflect consistent performance, or is it just a temporary spike?
That's interesting because in tournaments, sometimes an upset can cause such points fluctuations. But then you also have the debate about long term consistency versus one off resilient performances.
Right. It's like that quirky analogy. It's like winning a marathon by sprinting the last mile but stumbling along the rest. The momentum might shift, but you're not sure if it's sustainable over the whole season.
Yeah, I like that analogy. And diving a bit deeper, what do you think about the individual performances? There was a lot of talk about Magisk's rating improvement and Device's heroic returns, but were these moments enough to carry the team?
Well, while individual brilliance is essential, Counter-Strike is inherently a team game. Despite Magisk and Device having impressive numbers, Magisk at a 0.50% swing improvement and Device with a standout ADR, they alone couldn't compensate for the collective lapses, especially when strategic misfires occurred. Some rounds could have gone differently if everyone was on the same page.
That's true. And isn't it a bit ironic how some of the same players get criticized one moment and then praised the next? There's this fine line between individual heroics and letting team dynamics suffer.
Absolutely, and it opens up a healthy debate on whether the coaching strategies or the in-game communication are to blame. I've seen some critiques suggesting that the team should recalibrate their approach on the T side because honestly, losing rounds in losing positions is a red flag.
Yeah.
Perhaps it's time for a tactical overhaul.
I can see that. Now, shifting gears a bit, what about the community's reaction? The HLTV comments were blazing with opinions, from praising clutch plays to outright calling for disbandments. How do you weigh that feedback?
Oh man, the community is always so passionate, right? On one hand, you have shout-outs for players like Stairs and Makazi's clutches, and on the other, some fans were brutal, calling some parts of Astralis' performance worst ramp holder ever. It really reflects how polarized opinions can be when it comes to top-tier esports.
Yeah, it's like a double-edged sword. Feedback that fuels improvement or just fan outrage when things go sideways. And then there were some humorous jabs about missing logos and references to old matchups.
Right, the humor and the memes were on full display. Some fans joked about Astralis only playing decently against Navi while flopping against other teams. It's a mix of nostalgia for past glory and the sharp criticism of current performances.
Interesting. And how do you assess the overall match outcome? Astralis won 2-1, but did that truly reflect their capability, or was it a narrow escape?
That's the million-dollar question. The win, while after an intense overtime on one of the maps, felt more like a lucky escape rather than a dominant performance. Navi pushed them to the edge, and if there was a slight misstep, the momentum could have swung entirely. The stats show pretty close numbers and rounds being decided by mere margins.
So, in a sense, Astralis might have picked up the win, but still left plenty of room for improvement, especially in critical rounds where decision-making is key.
Exactly. And that's why many are wondering if this win will translate to better performances in future matches or if it's just a one-off anomaly. The pressure is definitely on, especially with playoffs looming.
Yeah, with the world rankings and points shifting, every match now counts. Do you think Astralis will tweak their strategies based on this performance?
I think so. They're a seasoned team. They'll likely review those rounds where they lost clear advantages, those rounds where it seemed like they were throwing away a win. It might be time to focus more on communication and adapting on the fly, especially on T side.
Sounds like a solid plan. And speaking of strategy, what's your take on NAVI's potential moving forward, given this match and their current team dynamics?
NAVI showed that they are capable of turning games around with clutch momentum plays. Their aggressive picks on Mirage and Inferno, paired with individual star performances, indicate they're evolving. However, they still have hiccups, like those all-in bets that sometimes just don't pay off.
Yeah,
They're clearly in a phase of transition and will need consistency if they want to climb higher.
I agree. Consistency is key. It's fascinating because even when teams seem to reinvent themselves mid-tournament, those old criticisms eventually resurface. There's a balance between innovation and sticking to proven methods.
Right. And if nothing else, this match provided some great highlights. Insane clutches, statistical battles, and even some controversial calls that will be dissected for weeks. It's all part of the evolving landscape of esports at this level.
And that's what makes following these tournaments so exciting. Each match is a microcosm of team dynamics, strategy, and pure skill under pressure. I'm already looking forward to the next IEM chapter.
Me too. It's like, a never-ending story of highs and lows. With every win and every tight round, we're reminded of the razor-thin margins that separate victory from defeat. It makes discussing it so much fun.
Totally. Well, that's a wrap for today's deep dive on Astralis versus Navi at IEM Chengdu 2025. Thanks for the insights and the lively exchange.
Thank you. And remember, keep your strategies sharp and your commentary even sharper. Catch you next time for another esports breakdown.